Welcome to the Dynasty Dummies podcast. I am Zach Reed. I'm joined tonight by JMic at JMic Check, and we are in the Dynasty Dummies rookie Hootenany wide receiver catch-all part 2. I believe we are at is this the 7th part of this series? Are we at that point? Like, holy cow, we have covered some ground. We've done 12 running backs. This will bring us to 24 wide receivers. And we've done quarterbacks and tight ends. And we're just getting warmed up. There's still another week's worth of wide receivers, I think. And then maybe some running backs and maybe a couple other tight ends that we're thinking about putting eyes on. And I don't know if I have the energy to get to Michael Penix and Bo Nix for real. But we'll see. But JMic, how are you this evening? It's good to be here. It's going to be an interesting group to talk about.
Man, my primary hope, Zach, is that if for whatever reason at some point you decide to trade me from this podcast, my hope is I can net more than a second, and I hope that you don't also have to send like future cash considerations and everything else that took place. Tough day for Steph Diggs, or maybe not. I guess we'll see. Because apparently everybody wins in trades and everybody loses in trades, except for Nico Collins and Tank Dell, as we know. But I'm grateful for this time with you, Zach. Grateful to be able to continue our Hootenany. The dancing shoes are still warm. We have cut an absolute rug on this dance floor, and we've got 6 more wide receivers. And I think that this is an interesting group because this now starts to take us into, in all likelihood, the 3rd and 4th rounds of our Dynasty League rookie drafts. So as we get into these later periods of our drafts and people have their guys or their speculative ads, these are the guys that are going to be going, in all likelihood, day 3 of the NFL draft. And they'll be finding or looking to find landing spots, ideally, that we can dream for an opportunity or dream for them to be the whoopee to some up and coming offense. And so when we look at the guys and the list of names, there are some that you may have heard of for sure. When I think of the likes of Jermaine Burton, who's been in college for a while, or even Johnny Wilson, who was a darling from the NFL Draft Combine. But we've also got names of folks that maybe you've forgotten about or haven't quite heard of because you haven't been in the weeds, whether it be a Malik Washington out of Virginia, Jamari Thrash, Louisville. Jamari Thrash out of Louisville, excuse me. That was gross. Or even the likes of Javon Baker, who was an Alabama transfer out to UCF. So we've got some fun guys. I think I even left out Isaiah Williams, Isaiah Williams, also from Illinois. So, Zach, I'm excited to be able to talk through these 6 guys. I think they are all wildly different players when we look at them, and lots of prospects to go around as to what could be for them. But before we get to them, what's on your mind? What kind of musings do you have?
So if you listened to this podcast at all or had any interactions with me on Twitter, especially about fantasy football, but life in general too, you've heard me mention Daniel Kahneman because he passed away last week on the 27th of March, but was a brilliant Nobel Prize winning behavioral economist whose fundamental belief was that everybody is wrong, and not that everybody's wrong all the time, but that everybody makes more mistakes than they're willing to admit to. And if you can stop and assess mistakes and figure out the reason why they happen instead of just glossing over them or pretending like they didn't happen, you're going to be better off. And he was notorious for himself disbelieving his own findings and kind of downplaying his role in things. And I think that's part of what made him so brilliant. And I think that it's kind of that Daniel Kahneman mindset that I try to, and we try to approach everything we do on the dummies, but especially our rookie evaluations, understanding that we're going to be wrong, that we're going to miss things, and trying to be better every single time we go out and do this. Try to revise and catch things that we were wrong on, find the root cause, do that analysis, and then not make quite that same mistake going forward. And it's people are really prone to this. People like to overestimate small sample sizes, and we do that. I mean, fantasy football, we have a very finite amount of data, and even like a season is 17 games, like that's nothing. And even a career is not very much. And so to try to build out predictions and projections on this small sample size is really difficult. Within the framework of college athletes, you've got a small sample size that's not a 1-for-1 translation to the next level. So there's a lot going on there. And also one of the things that he was stuck on is how people tend to relate their current issues to whatever issue they had most recently that is close enough. And so you have this like single sample size recency bias that tries to creep in. And so I wanted to mention him again because he's brilliant and kind of has a hand in so much of the way that I view fantasy football, but also life, and wanted to just make sure I mentioned Daniel Kahneman again. He was 90 years old, so it was a good life and a very productive life in terms of what he did for economics, what he did for human behavior and psychology. So that's my little kind of rumination that was kicking around this evening, JMic.
Yeah, and what a life well lived in the fact of what his impact is and how wide reaching that is. Again, we think through economics and maybe a lot of the places where he intended for his research and thoughts to be leveraged. And here we are, a game about a game, and how it not only helps us to be better at what we do, but just understanding how fickle some of this can be, how fleeting how some of this can be. So, yeah, very well said, Zach. Very well said. All right, y'all. Hootenany, get your shoes on, get your spoons ready, get your cowboy hats ready to go. We've got the 2-step all the way to Virginia to start things off. Yes, Tim, I see you in the chat. Tim, starting with the one, the only, Malik Washington. He was a transfer from Northwestern, transferred to Virginia for his final season in 2023. 5'8", 191. We're looking at a guy who ran a 4.47 at the combine, but jumped 42.5 inches on his vertical. What? Wahoo indeed. In that final season for the Cavaliers, 12 games, 110 catches for 1,426 yards and 9 touchdowns. Those 110 catches were good for tops in the entire NCAA for receptions. Yes, he was making things happen underneath like an absolute boss, but he was able to sneak by and get some things done downfield as well. Also, the 1,426 yards that he was able to receive was number 1 in the ACC. So we're talking about a guy who not only got a ton of work in terms of actually volume, but also did a ton of really good things with the volume that he got. Malik Washington, sleeper among sleepers that is not really sleeping so much these days. Zach, what you got?
Sports don't always get very creative when it comes to naming positions. A hitter in baseball is the player who hits the ball with a bat. A goaltender tends the goal. Likewise, a receiver is pretty aptly named as well. And the receiver with the most catches in all of college football in 2023 was Virginia's Malik Washington. 110 is a lot. Even though that reception number is eye-popping, it's really what Washington does after the catch that separates him from the field. He's tremendous with the ball. He adds extra yards with quickness, with contact balance, and even a surprising number of broken tackles for a smaller player, a slot receiver who's 5'9", 190-ish pounds. Washington is a master of seeking separation against zone coverages as well. He darts underneath and picks apart the seams to create throwing lanes for his quarterback. And I think at the catch point, Washington is really good. He's got very soft hands. He generally catches the ball cleanly, doesn't double catch, and rarely lets the ball get in on his frame, which is something, if you're going to have that volume of balls thrown at you, being able to hands catch, being able to catch that cleanly, being able to defend that catch from the corner with your body is something that you like to see.
Yeah, that was one of the more shocking pieces, I think, Zach, that you and I saw similarly there. In traffic, he was strangely good in ground fights when it comes to the traffic or people being on him. And I don't know if it's a matter of his just leverage from how tall he is, or I guess not how tall he's not, but it was really cool to be able to see him not be bullied at the catch point in traffic amongst bigger defenders. I got cognitive dissonance abounds there, and I didn't understand that. Majority of his work, I feel like, is done underneath. So we're seeing a lot of slants, a lot of speed outs, really leveraging his ability and his quickness out of the slot, which I think is really cool. While sometimes I think that there's minimal downfield effectiveness, he is able to get loose when it comes to wheel routes, double moves. I think that's where he makes a lot of his hay, and they did a lot of really fun things with him in terms of putting him right there off of the wing of the tight end or off of the tackle. And I think they did a great job of manufacturing him touches, but that's not a knock against the things that he's able to do, because when the ball is in his hand, really good things happen. I think that he's above average when it comes to his after the catch ability, because just like you talked about, Zach, I think we see a lot of sparks of him being really slippery, and he's able to chain things together when he gets going. I think that there are times where he doesn't necessarily get it going, and when people get on him, like, it kind of ends the play pretty quickly, but his effectiveness or his quickness allows him to be able to do awesome things. That said, there's a reason that we're talking about him on this day of the catch-all as opposed to much earlier in this process, Zach. What do you got for us in terms of drawbacks with Malik Washington?
Well, it's not the size of the boat. It's the motion of the Washington. In order to facilitate separation, Virginia put Malik Washington in motion a ton. Nearly every play, he's crossing the formation, moving from flanker to slot, or even replacing himself. All of this movement serves to help Washington create space, because I think that is surprisingly not necessarily a strength of his in route. He's routinely bothered by physical man coverage, and even his ability at the stem of routes to cut isn't quite sudden enough for him to pull away from a blanketing defender. On the face of things, I think it seems like Malik Washington is a lock to find a productive role with his NFL squad, but I think he's more of a lion post catch and a little bit of a paper tiger within his routes. Washington is almost surely a slot-only receiver at the next level, and I think he's going to rely on target volume and being scheme touches to put up fantasy points. So that's not to say that he won't be successful, but he's got to be in a place where you've got an innovative coach willing to put him in space to get him the looks that he needs.
And that's maybe it's just that we've been doing this for so long, Zach, because that was one of my notes here is Malik Washington challenging Ricky Pearsall for do you know the motion man, the motion man? Like I don't know. I still think that Ricky Pearsall's king, but Malik is coming for the crown when it comes to how they were leveraging him. And I think that you hit the nail on the head when I think through his drawbacks. He is easily rerouted, specifically when his routes are intermediate and deeper. And I think that limits what he's actually able to do downfield, which I don't know if that's something that the coaches knew and they just didn't have him do a ton of it, or the fact that, hey, you're really good underneath. We're just going to make sure that you do the thing that you're really good at. And so that really bothered me. And when it comes to blocking, it's absolutely a no can do. While he tries at times, he just gets bullied and physically is not able to hold up. And when he's working vertical against press, it's a lot of activity that doesn't amount to much achievement when it comes to that space. And so I think that when you see the 4.47 that he runs and you see the vertical jump, you don't necessarily see those things displayed as clearly vertically on film. And so I'm just curious, him having the 42.5 vertical is great, but if they're not throwing you jump balls or you're not you being 5'8", like that's a limitation in itself. Fun player, prospects at the next level for fantasy goodness. I guess we'll see. Next up, we are heading down to Louisville, Kentucky to talk about wide receiver Jamari Thrash. All right, I won't be a hater. I say that in my UK hoodie, by the way. Jamari Thrash, out of Louisville. He's a Georgia State transfer, 6 feet, 188 pounds. 40-yard dash was 4.46, so another guy running in the 4.4s here. And actually in 2022, before he got to Louisville, he led the Sun Belt Conference in receiving yards, 1,122 yards. In his only season at Louisville, 63 catches, 858 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Again, Louisville had a really nice season out in the ACC. They were really ideally hoping to be pushing toward the college football playoff and all sorts of wonderful things. And then they ended up getting mollywopped by Kentucky, but that's something else that we can talk about another day. That's, Governor's Cup belongs in Lexington, so on and so forth. Jamari Thrash, let's talk about him, Zach. What do you have on a guy who really did good work at a lower level and came and did good work again in the ACC?
It's inevitable that within a class as talented and deep as the 2024 wide receiver group is, that there are going to be 10 or 12 players that various analysts will say are underrated. This is my guy. This is the sleeper. The problem with that is that someone has to be the wide receiver 12 in every class, even if all classes aren't created equally. This year, Jamari Thrash just happens to be that guy. Thrash is death by 1,000 cuts. Very rarely does he break away from the defense for lightning strikes, but he consistently makes the exact play that he's asked to make. He's very savvy off the line of scrimmage versus press coverage. He uses a jab step and a crossover step, sometimes in combination, to get early separation. Thrash is also great at identifying and attacking off coverage, using leverage and cushion to his advantage with digs and curls and hitches and those quick slants. But I think his true go-to tool to create separation is his ability in a straight line to sink his hips and suddenly change direction within a route. That gets him separation so often, even from good man coverage.
Yeah, and again, a guy at 6 feet, 188 pounds, like you're thinking, yes, you should be able to maneuver in such a way that allows you to be able to gain separation. But I think the consistency with which he goes about that on a play-in, play-out basis is one of the things that actually has me hopeful for his prospects, because when we think about the game, and I can't remember, I think it might have been Ben Gretsch from Ship Chasing and Stealing Bananas, and he has his own Substack. I forgot what it's called. Stealing Signals. But he's an incredible mind in this space. And one of the things that he's harped on of late is just talking about how the wide receiver position in the NFL is a down to down consistency success. Like the guys who have success are consistent down to down. Like it's not a case where you can just kind of be subpar and then all of a sudden continue to get the opportunity. Like you down to down, you need to be doing your role. And so when we're thinking about Jamari Thrash, I think that consistently, as you're saying, Zach, his head fakes and footwork in terms of his quickness allow him to really manipulate defenders. And again, we'll talk about this with someone else, but working in the shadows of the defender. So really getting them to turn their head or turn their hips and being able to work off of that in great ways. I love the way that he's able to push vertically before the break. I think that he's consistently threatening to eliminate cushion over and over and over again. He puts corners in a blender with that footwork against press man, as you're talking through. I think there's consistent hand fighting. I think the suddenness, as you explained, in and out of breaks, and starting to get a little nauseous because I'm saying a lot of really nice things about a Louisville player. But even still after the catch, how savvy he is with his quick transition to a runner, even though I don't know that he's, again, activity does not equal achievement. I think that he's consistently looking to do more with the ball in his hands. I don't know that he was always successful to consistently do more after the catch. But again, lineup versatility to be able to go out wide, be in the slot, work the curl route like nobody's business. I really thought Jamari Thrash showed well in plenty of spaces on film. But again, when you go to Louisville, you're bound to have things that don't go well for you, Zach. So let's talk about those things.
I think one of the most puzzling aspects of watching Jamari Thrash is trying to reconcile the fact that he is a deep threat. He can get over the top. He's able to get there with that speed, but is borderline anemic at the catch point. Like he doesn't win high point plays. He's not great physically at the catch point. Even post catch, I think Thrash is lacking a bit of wiggle. He adds yards after the catch, but only like what you would expect him to get, not adding many dynamic chunk plays. And I think while most of the time he's able to separate himself from defenders with those quick changes of direction, Thrash struggles when he has to make plays through that contact and in traffic. So again, not just down the field at high point plays, but over the middle in traffic. He does not like that physicality when he loses that separation, whether it's his fault or the quarterback, the ball placement. In the grand scheme of the 2024 class, Jamari Thrash is probably pretty close to aptly rated, even though your favorite analyst may say he's underrated. But the number of potential fantasy contributors at the wide receiver position this year is especially high. While Thrash does not appear to be a primary option at the next level, I don't think it's unreasonable that he could be a productive secondary target in an offense and eventually a potential flex play for your fantasy rosters.
Yeah, his physicality or lack thereof in this sense really becomes a thing that just brings all of the goodness that he's doing before the actual catch point. It just nullifies a lot of it many of the times. I think he's got very questionable ball tracking and downright deficient fight in contested opportunities downfield. We're talking about someone who, even when he tries fighting through physical play, he's losing those interactions routinely. I think he's got average hands with routine drops. And it's not a matter of like him trying to necessarily like make these circus or crazy catches, but and you've talked about these things before, Zach, when it comes to cluster drops that just pop up and you're just like, what is that? that was easy. And again, his play strength is a thing that just is so low. So yeah, I think that his 6 feet 188 shows at times, and it's not pretty. Again, a lot of really fun things, especially before the catch point, and as he's working through his route, and then everything thereafter needs work. Needs work. On to the next one. We go from talking Malik Washington and the likes of Jamari Thrash to all the way up 6'6", 231 pounds, originally from Arizona State, transfers to Florida State. One Johnny, I move like a tight end most of the time, Wilson. Johnny Wilson at the combine shocked a lot of folks because a lot of the conversation was, hey, he's a tight end in wide receiver clothing. He's not really a wide out. And then he goes and runs a 4.52. And then people were like, oh, well, maybe, just maybe you can play wide receiver at the next level. He did lead the ACC in receiving yards per reception in 2022 with 20.9 yards per catch. That's pretty good. After not getting a ton of work in his first 2 seasons at Arizona State, obviously spending time down there with Jaden Daniels, he transfers to Florida State these past 2 seasons. And really, it was the 2022 season that really showed off his goods. 43 catches, 897 yards, and 5 touchdowns. A little bit of injury bug getting him this past season in 2023 in 10 games, 41 catches, 617 yards, 2 touchdowns. Oh, yeah. And on the other side, one Keon Coleman entering the picture as well. That will put a damper on your production. Johnny Wilson, big, pretty fast for his size. Zach, are you excited about what could be?
I'm excited-ish. We'll see. The average human male is 5'9" tall. An average refrigerator is 6 feet tall. The current average height of an NBA player is 6'6". Johnny Wilson is above average. He came in at the NFL Combine at 6'6" and 3/8 of an inch. Don't short him there. I heard you give him the 6'6". He's got 3/8 above that. He showed off a wingspan of just over 7 feet and ran a 4.52 40-yard dash. If Wilson did not turn the heads of NFL scouts with those numbers, it feels like at the very least, maybe Greg Popovich is going to be intrigued. In order to succeed as a taller receiver, Wilson has had to figure out how to win at the line of scrimmage. It seems intuitive that Wilson leverages his size advantage, and specifically, he does a great job keeping defenders at arm's length during the initial jam, and he creates space for himself that way in order to be able to work. And this ability to separate actually creates early opportunities for Wilson to see targets in close to the line of scrimmage, which was an interesting thing. You don't necessarily think of a receiver that big being a close to the line of scrimmage player, but that's what Wilson did a lot of. And I think also he is deceptively quick in a straight line. His speed often sneaks up on unsuspecting defenders for plays over the top. So like he's not just a close to the line of scrimmage player. He's got a little bit of extra speed that he can get over the top, but it's like surprise me speed, not he's not getting over the top John Ross style.
And I think, Zach, that as the year progressed, especially when we watch games in 2023, we see him against LSU really do a lot of really just being very physical at the line of scrimmage and trying to push off to be able to find space. I don't know if it was a matter of him still needing to find or get development, or if that was just like, hey, I feel like this is the only way that I can win. But even as the year goes on and you watch, he's consistently using more moves and just trying to push his way to get that space. And by the time we get toward the end of the year, when he's playing the likes of Miami and things of that nature, just like you said, highlighting the fact that he's able to run slants, run ends, run digs routinely with space. And I think that just showed his growth in this one season alone, which I thought was really just cool to be able to track throughout. So at the start of a route, like you talked about, being able to always look for contact, but then obviously progressing as he goes forward. I was almost thinking like he had that like push-pull move like defensive ends do. It's like put my man off the edge, get him paid. I think within the route, I think that his long strides, and you highlighted this, Zach, his long strides close cushion quicker than defenders seem prepared for. And so I think that that's where his height really plays well. If they're playing any kind of off coverage, he's on top of folks. And I don't think that they're ready for that when that happens. For intermediate routes, I think he leverages tempo variation on longer developing things. So it's kind of slow and just kind of methodical, lackadaisical looking. And then he kind of turns it on. And not that the turn on is extra fast, but again, those strides start to eat up a lot of space. And at 4.5 in those strides, good things tend to happen for him to be able to be a weapon or be a target for Jordan Travis last season. You highlighted this too. Short area burst, quote unquote, and his physicality at the stem is enough to consistently make space at the catch point, which again, I didn't anticipate that. And it was just really weird even seeing it because there's not people who do a lot of that at his size in the NFL, let alone anywhere else. I think he does flash. He flashes ability to absorb contact in traffic when extending the catch, and he flashes high point ability to win within the field. I do think that he has really good work against the sideline. I do think that he's very successful in terms of catching the ball outside of his frame in those instances when he's not being muscled.
Yeah.
Now, I use flashes and for a reason, Zach. Let's keep it going on areas of deficiency for Johnny Wilson.
Yeah, Wilson's height is impressive. It's easy to dream on. You see that big frame and you're like, oh, we can work with this, but he does have some limitations in the intermediate to deep areas of the field. Wilson has trouble separating and keeping separation, especially when facing man coverage. It's that lack of just a little bit of quickness and just a little bit of speed. Lateral movement is a chore. I don't think Wilson changes direction with quickness, nor does he pick up speed well when he's forced to alter his route. So like if he's going in one direction, he's fine. But if you can bump him off and make him change direction, he doesn't reset and pick up speed very well. As big as he is, he also does not play through contact very well. Often a physical defender can be disruptive enough to keep Wilson from getting both hands on the ball to secure a catch. And it's even an issue once he's got the ball. There were several times where a defender knocked the ball away from Wilson once he'd started to tuck and run. I think there's no question that Johnny Wilson is a walking mismatch. But I think it remains to be seen whether or not his height and length are enough to produce as a receiver at the next level. It seems like a long shot that he will put up great numbers for fantasy. And I hate to do this to the guy because he's not in the league yet, but unless he shifts positions to tight end, a la Darren Waller, and it seems counterintuitive because tight end is a physical position, but the type of tight end and the type of mismatches you can create with his speed and ability in the short and intermediate areas will allow him space to work with that big frame instead of him trying to fight through contact all the time.
Could not agree more. And I think that lack of quickness that you're talking about, Zach, specifically laterally, but also that lack of quickness early, that does allow him to not play the sideline very well. And there's a couple of guys that we'll talk about that I do like how they play the sideline when they get vertical. So he's kind of ridden off of his route. And I think that a lot of his moves also, because of in instances, that lack of a lateral quickness, his moves are telegraphed, specifically on deeper routes. So I think that the further downfield that he goes, so like 15-yard comeback or whatever the case is. There's a lot of steps that it takes to be able to change direction or come back to the ball. And again, I don't think you see it as much when it's the 5-yard variety or even the 8 to 10-yard variety. But the things further down the field, it's a real chore for him to get it turned around. I think that he struggles to make adjustments to passes that require a quick and abrupt change of direction. So while he's got an awesome catch radius, if he's got a turn spin to be able to go behind him to get the ball, we're not seeing him make those catches. It's not that he can't adjust to even get a hand on it, but he's not. I don't know if it's the coordination, but he's not fulfilling, I think, as many as he should in those opportunities. When it's up and over the middle, I think that he does a great job of just being able to pluck it out of the air, but adjustments on those balls just don't tend to go well. He loses an inordinate amount of 50-50 opportunities by being out-physicaled. And again, with Keon Coleman on the other side, I understand that you're not going to get as many opportunities as probably you'd hope, but Florida State did not leverage him in the red zone as often as you'd think a 6 foot, almost 7 guy should have. But also he wasn't winning. He wasn't winning enough of those in the field, I think, to even earn those opportunities.
It's kind of like watching N'Keal Harry on N'Keal Harry's shoulders.
Yeah, like it's just it's strange because you see one thing against the sidelines, like, oh, that was nice, and then there'll be other times where he just will get bullied or won't make the play or just gets thrown out of bounds as he's trying to make the play. It's strange. And again, when we talk about the run after the catch, I think that he's really limited to just trying to overpower people because, again, the lack of the lateral agility. So I think, again, there are flashes of some really cool moments, and maybe the change of position might be helpful. And who am I? Maybe he goes on and he's an amazing wide receiver. But anywho, we've got 3 guys left that we'll get to, and I think this should be a fun discussion. We've got the likes of one Javon Baker. Again, originally from Alabama, transfers to UCF, 6'1", 202, 40-yard dash, 4.54. And in 2023, he led the Big 12 in receiving yards, 1,139 yards, and receiving yards per reception, 21.9 yards per catch at Alabama. It's not that he didn't have the actual games played to be able to do that, because, again, in his freshman season 2020 and in his sophomore season in 2021, 11 games played, but not getting the opportunity to do a ton there. So he transfers to UCF. Their first season, they're in the American Conference. The next year, they're in the Big 12. And this final season, 52 catches, 1,139 yards, as mentioned before, 7 touchdowns. Javon Baker, vertical threat. Couldn't cut it at Alabama, but again, we've seen that people can transfer out and do good things in other places. Zach, what do you think about old Javon?
I see you buried the lead, because for 4 beautiful months at the beginning of 2022, Javon Baker was the crown jewel of the Kentucky Wildcats receiving corps. It turned out to just be a layover between Alabama and his final destination at UCF, where Baker finished his career with back-to-back 50-catch seasons and 1,100 yards in 2023. I think Baker probably profiles as an outside receiver. So his ability to get off press coverage with a stutter move, a jab, and hand fighting should serve him well at the next level. En route, Baker has an arsenal of double moves to help him get deep, and he does a great job identifying leverage and using fakes to get open at the stem of routes as well. When working on the boundaries, and I think this is where you were talking guys who play the boundaries well, Javon Baker is successful time and time again at making back shoulder adjustments at the exact moment he needs to. And it's really interesting to watch a player who can do that, who can present late hands, because it doesn't give the defender time enough to react to the ball. And so it ends up being Baker as the only player with a play on the ball, even though the ball may not have been thrown perfectly. And even when Baker loses the separation battle in route, and he does that sometimes, like I don't think he is flat out fast. So oftentimes he'll win with that leverage and making fakes or double moves, lose the separation, but he is a master at re-separating late just before the ball gets to him.
I feel like there's so many times where you watch films like I don't know how he's open now. Like, how do you do that? It doesn't make sense to be open and then not be open and then be open again, and it's all in the same route. It's wild. We do see him. I think that as far as being a vertical threat, I feel like he most often wins by running past defenders when he's lined up in the slot. And so I think that that's a really cool thing that could be leveraged at the next level. He does consistently line up out wide as well. I think that interchangeable piece in that sense. While his cuts aren't sharp consistently, I do think that he's able to create space at the top of the route with powerful cuts and head fakes. And again, I mentioned this earlier. Again, working in the shadows of the corner or of the defender, I think that he does a good job of doing that, specifically when he's the strong side of the offense or play side, because when he's backside, he's kind of big chilling many times. But I do like his bursting quickness with a good bit of subtle push-offs at the stem. I think he uses his physicality well while running. I think he does a good job of those things. Furthermore, I think the work that he also does on the sideline, tough catches, nice footwork, and consistently 2 feet down, toe drag swag. We are watching someone who really wants to own the outside like a boss, and I think that his body control to be able to contort and make the circus catches. Again, we just talked about Johnny Wilson, who can kind of go up to do fun things at times in flashes, but doesn't adjust to be able to do silly things. Javon Baker is making adjustments like nobody's business, and I think that points to his tracking ability being, I don't want to say elite, but it is great. Like, it is great tracking ability that he's able to exhibit consistently. He consistently is running through smaller defenders once the ball's in his hand as well. So I think that Javon Baker is a very, very interesting prospect. Why, Javon, did you transfer from Alabama to UCF? Zach, can you answer the question?
Well, I think to be truly elite from the outside, and that's what you need to be in the SEC, a receiver has to be able to separate deep consistently. And I think that's something that Javon Baker doesn't quite do. He's not that straight line separator, at least not truly. And I mentioned that before. He lacks the elite top end speed to run away from defenders. I also don't think he's consistently sudden as a player. And this is especially noticeable when he is not getting the ball. His release is slow when the play is designed as a run, or he's not the first read. And man, as a player going on to the elite of the elite levels of play, consistent effort is got to be there, or you're going to get your lunch eaten. I think it's difficult a little bit to pick apart Javon Baker's profile. There's so much that he does that I really like. His ability to separate in the intermediate and deep areas ought to get Baker on the field, but it's his play at the boundaries that will keep him there. That back shoulder throw, which is a big time NFL throw, especially with the way defenses are trying to funnel players to the middle, and the second level to the outside. Those are plays that, man, Baker makes really well. I think his per touch efficiency could make him a really interesting second option early on for both NFL teams and for fantasy potential as well. And if he starts getting looks, there's a chance he can grow into a bigger role.
Yeah, and it's funny because I just got done praising his ball tracking, Zach, and I think that so much of that is really short and intermediate based, where he's doing the bulk of that. Because I think that when he's deep downfield, especially when he's outside of the numbers, we're going to talk about a guy who in a minute I think does something that maybe nobody else in this group does down the field. But deep, I think that Javon Baker often can allow himself to just kind of be ridden at the catch point. And so it's almost as if he's trying to just focus on making sure that he's getting the catch, but then like the hand fighting will stop or whatever the case is. And he allows himself to not really make plays on deep passes that are kind of questionable. Now, I do think one of the really interesting things, and we don't often bring this up, but I thought this was a really stark difference. They had a couple of different quarterbacks for UCF play this past year, and I think that they started the year with a guy, and I don't know if it was because John Reese Plumlee was hurt, but then by the time Plumlee came along, Plumlee was doing Javon a lot of favors by throwing a much more accurate pass, not scrambling as much and giving him far more opportunities, where the other quarterback was scrambling a lot, holding the ball. And I thought it was just a real stark difference as to how the offense flowed, which I think also played into some of his inability to consistently give effort at times or be engaged. Because even with Plumlee at quarterback, we still would see him kind of just big chilling backside specifically. Sometimes I think he would hear steps over the middle. So a pass would be going over the middle, and he's like, oh, I see the safety over there, and kind of short arm and be looking. Didn't love instances of that, and it wasn't a ton of times, but I didn't necessarily love that about it, about his game. So I think he does a lot of really fun things, and if given the room and the time to develop, I'm excited for what could be for Javon Baker. I don't know if he's going to get that opportunity, but if he can do enough in these early years and show that engagement, there's real good opportunity for him to be someone that sticks for years to come. All right, still got two guys left. I've talked way too much today. Let's talk Isaiah Williams. I'll try to be much faster, Zach. Isaiah Williams, quickness out the wazoo. Illinois, wide receiver, 5'9", 182 pounds. While quick, not necessarily long speed fast. 4'6", 340 at the combine, 38-inch vertical though. And he did lead the Big Ten in receptions in 2023 with 82 receptions. We are looking at a guy who in his 5th season at Illinois, 12 games played, 82 catches in 2022, and then 82 catches again in 2023. 1,055 yards in this final season, 5 touchdowns last year, 5 touchdowns this year. Look, Isaiah Williams was the be-all, end-all for an anemic – I won't say anemic. That's not nice. A passing game that was just kind of hit or miss for Illinois. Isaiah Williams doing a ton of work underneath Zach. Another slot maven similar to Malik Washington. Let's talk about Isaiah Williams.
Yeah, the lights, the bells, the whistles, the jangling clatter of cash pouring out by the bucketful. There are 122,247 slot machines in Las Vegas. There was just one slot machine on the University of Illinois' roster in 2023. That was Isaiah Williams. With a career ADOT of just 6.7 yards, Williams does not often venture far from the line of scrimmage, but he made the most of his 82 catches in 2023. Separation, it's such a simple word, and yet it can be such a difficult accomplishment.
Yes.
Except it comes naturally to Isaiah Williams. He is so sudden at the stem of his routes, and he changes direction so quickly that he can win both with and without the ball.
Yep.
Post-catch, Williams transitions to a runner almost immediately. It's beautiful to watch him make that catch and all of a sudden identify what's ahead of him and run. And it allows him to evade tackles and tack on extra yards after the catch on nearly every play that he gets the ball. He also reads leverage very well. he'll wait for a defender to commit before he makes that move to counter and cut into space.
And that quickness that he's able to exhibit when he does that, Zach, just finds him open space consistently, as consistent as anyone probably that we'll talk about today. His short area quickness, as you highlighted, is something that is absolutely deadly. And the combination of moves and footwork that he's able to do within his route to be able to get space, whether it be shake routes or just putting a little extra mustard. And I think that he does something, please don't hear what I'm not saying, people. He does something I think that Cooper Kupp does, in that, like, it looks like one route. It looks like it's one thing. And then it totally breaks off into something different. And it's open space consistently. And I don't know how he does it, but that kind of burst of route in space is a tool that is friendly to any and all offenses, any and all quarterback types. Again, he lives in the intermediate to underneath space, but he consistently finds space. And I think that's something to certainly highlight. All right, Zach, let's talk about the things about Isaiah Williams' game that aren't so good.
Yeah, it's pretty wild that he started off. His first 2 years at Illinois, he was a quarterback. Like, that's pretty wild to me. But the idea that a receiver should be able to win at every level or in every situation is nice. It's a little pie in the sky, usually unrealistic. And Isaiah Williams seems very unlikely to win downfield at the next level. In addition to him being 5'9" and 182 pounds, Williams' straight line speed just isn't quite enough to allow him to separate deep. He doesn't have the height, the timing, or the leaping ability to be a consistent winner at the catch point either. But I think the oddest flaw in his game comes at the end of routes.
Yes.
Or more specifically, he doesn't freestyle at all after he's run a route that is supposed to have been run. So he'll run a hitch or an out, and if he hasn't drawn a throw, he stops. And even if the quarterback has extended the play in the pocket, he's just where he ended up at the end of that route. I think Isaiah Williams is a slot receiver, and that's okay. The problem, at least for me within the landscape of fantasy football, is that slot-only players who don't have some degree of verticality to their game are being phased out in favor of sliding X-type receivers inside for more slot snaps, because they can create that vertical separation, the mismatch problems. I think there's a chance that Isaiah Williams gets lost in the shuffle like the Tyler Boyds, the Hunter Renfros, and the rest of that slot-only archetype. And I think it's only going to get worse until defenses start getting bigger again.
Yeah. Well, I yes. And I'll keep it brief. I don't want to say all the things that I wasn't thrilled about, because I don't want to pile on. I think that, the scramble drill piece, Zach, was the most frustrating thing to watch. Him just chilling. Like, be a lifeline, be anything, be something for your quarterback. No, you just gonna hang out. All right, bet. And no vertical fight that I can remember, like, winning at any point. And I don't know that I've given a lower vertical fight grade to anybody. And I don't know that it's totally his fault. But just, I think I counted 2 like opportunities for him to like go up and try to make a play, and both were thwarted. And I was just like, this doesn't even look like you had a chance on either of these. Man, for someone who does so much good underneath, Zach, I don't know what to do with it. So I'm gonna move on because I don't know what to do. All right, last name on the evening. One, Jermaine Burton, was a little frustrated with having all of the frills of life. Apparently, being at the University of Georgia was not good enough, not affording him enough opportunities, wonderful things, winning. So you know what? I'm gonna trade in my Gucci for a Louis. And I'm going to the University of Alabama because I need the finer things. I have to maintain a certain style of a living. 6 feet, 196 pounds, running 4.45 at the combine, 38.5-inch vertical, Zach. Love to see those things. And he led the SEC in receiving yards per reception. I wasn't aware that was the case until we started doing the research here. Again, 2 years at Georgia. His best season at Georgia was a sophomore year, 26 catches, 497 yards, 5 touchdowns. That's not going to get you looks at the NFL unless your name's Lab McConkey. Fast forward to 2023, where at Alabama, the numbers aren't eye-popping, but hey, 39 catches, 798 yards, 8 touchdowns, a trip to the college football playoff. Hey, things are looking up for Jermaine Burton. Pretty good decision, perhaps, maybe to leave Georgia. Similar to Adonai Mitchell, again, guy that he was playing with at the time. Let's talk Jermaine Burton as we close out this Hootenany overflow.
So we're in the middle of the pre-draft process at a point where every single week there's a new dynasty darling. It's the next big thing that nobody knows about. And this week, and shout out to JJ Zacharyson, who I absolutely love, but this week it's been Jermaine Burton. It had been Isaiah Davis. It has been Ben Sinnott. But currently there is the big push to thrust Jermaine Burton into that spotlight. Although it's hard to designate a receiver who has played at Georgia and Alabama as a sleeper. There are a lot of impressive pieces, I think, to Burton's game. His in-route strength is unrivaled in this class, except for maybe Marvin Harrison Jr.'s. You may have heard of him. Yeah. Burton will add yards after the catch, especially against zone coverages or on screens where he has more room to operate immediately after making the grab. And although he can be quick, he's not consistent with that quickness, and it drives me nuts. Burton tends to be far more successful with off coverages than he does with maintaining agility versus tighter coverages, even though he can succeed against press and against good man coverage. When all the cylinders are firing, Burton can be a dangerous deep threat with the ability to play and make plays through contact as well. Again, I don't think there is a player other than maybe Marvin Harrison who plays to and through contact better than Jermaine Burton downfield.
Yeah, Zach, and he does something really unique for I think a lot of players even in this class, and I'm glad that you highlighted that physicality piece. And I'm thinking specifically when you're an outside receiver and you're working vertically, obviously you want to ensure that you are giving room between the numbers and the sideline for the quarterback to be able to layer those or have room to throw those fades or whatever the case may be down the field. Jermaine Burton does an awesome job in route to be able to force he's got outside leverage. He's forcing the defender further in as he's running vertically and affords the quarterback room to be able to try to lay the throw in. Now, again, I can't even remember the kid's name who was the quarterback at Alabama this past season, but there were plenty of instances and times where the ball would just sail out of bounds. It wasn't great. But I really love, not only are you physically able to do that, but to have the wherewithal to consistently do it. Because that will consistently give him an opportunity to make those plays. I think his quickness at the stem, he's using so few steps on outbreakers, so few steps to be able to break. And again, I think that's more of a when he's engaged piece, because there are plenty of times where I know it doesn't always look as strong there, but I think that for me, it happened consistently enough for him to be able to own the skill. I think that his suddenness and his ability to shift gears up or shift gears down enhance his acceleration. His ability in terms of being able to pick up speed and gear down or gear up is something that I thoroughly enjoy. I think that his top end speed helps him routinely win deep, aside from weird spaces where his physicality just kind of fades away. And I don't understand how it's like you get zapped like the Monstars, or excuse me, like the like the Toon Squad, or like the NBA players in Space Jam. Like, how do you have it and then all of a sudden you don't? But I do think at the catch point, even though he's got some maddening drops, I think he's an awesome plucker of the football consistently. And I really like that he's looking to get more after the catch, even when he's sometimes doing a little too much juking and jiving for my liking. If he would just kind of run and go, like we see him also run through people and do really cool things. I think that there's I'm not going to sit here and say it's a really high ceiling, but I think that there's a ceiling there that's worth exploring. But Zac, you and I both talk through it. There's plenty of frustrating things that we see when we talk through Jermaine Burton.
Yeah, it's the lack of consistency with Jermaine Burton that really drives me nuts. It's the lack of consistency with quickness, and that causes Burton to fail to gain separation fairly often against man coverage. It's a lack of consistency on deeper routes where he often gets more concerned with winning the battle of physicality with the defender than he is about actually tracking the ball. So he'll beat up on a corner and not make a catch because he is getting in and getting physical. While there are a lot of flashes of exceptional skill across Jermaine Burton's film, again, that word, it's his inconsistency with both effort and sometimes understanding of how to accomplish what he's intending to do that is so frustrating because of how much talent he has. Burton also has a bad habit of, and this is a minor thing, but a bad habit of overrunning blocks on the outside. And he leaves his teammates vulnerable to being tackled by his assignment because he ran past and just allowed a defender in. There's a lot of buzz around Jermaine Burton, and warranted. You pair that with his SEC pedigree and his team leading yardage and touchdown totals, and there's a foundation of a really tempting profile here. A lot to me depends on whether an NFL team sees a diamond in the rough or just a brawler who can split out wide. Burton's game probably continues to flash at the next level. I think he may even eventually be a starter for an NFL team. I'm really struggling to see him develop past the flex play for fantasy football, even though I think the talent is there.
And even highlighting earlier, Zac, the fact, again, what Ben Gretsch talked about, the consistency on a down-to-down basis matters so much at the wide receiver position. And not having that with Jermaine Burton is just, and again, I don't think it's a matter of skill. I think I don't know the man. I shouldn't say that. I don't know if it's not a matter of will or whatever the case is, but I think I'm probably willing to, if he gets any kind of capital that's not like bottom of the barrel, I'm going to be really excited to lean into what could be with Jermaine Burton, because those later cuts, I do want to swing big, and I think that he allows for a ceiling that would have me excited to swing for. But yeah, an enigma, a true enigma when we're thinking through this position. All right, Zac. We've talked another 6 guys on the board. We've got a rather large list of wide receivers to this point. For those that may be new to the program, welcome. But also keep in mind, at this point, we're going to be talking through our film grades. So lots of things to come in terms of rankings and how we'll have guys tiered and things of that nature. But we're giving you our raw film grades in terms of how these players stacked up against each other. And then, Zac, of course, you know the drill. If you'd like to be able to give the landscape around them, you can go for that as well.
Yeah. So this week, It is Javon Baker up at the top. I've got him in that third tier of wide receivers that I've got. That's kind of a big tier. It's behind Harrison, behind Neighbors, behind the Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas, Romo Dunze tier. In that Tez Walker, Ricky Pearsall range, there's Javon Baker. At the bottom of that big glut of wide receivers I think are good is Jamari Thrash, the second receiver in today's group. Just below him, Jermaine Burton, with all of that upside and all of that frustration and inconsistency. And then you got to move a little ways down to find Malik Washington, who, again, really great slot player, but I struggle with the idea of an NFL team giving him enough targets and manufacturing enough targets to get us quite where we want in fantasy. Johnny Wilson, with the potential, in close to the line of scrimmage, is next, but he's, again, way down the list. He's below Keon Coleman and below Roman Wilson for me. So in kind of no man's land where I'm probably not ending up with him unless he positional switches, or if I get a deep rookie draft. And pulling up the rear of these six is going to be Isaiah Williams, the former quarterback, future slot receiver in the NFL. But what are we really gaining from that? So yeah. Baker, Thrash, Burton, Washington, Wilson, Williams, a fun group to watch. And one of those players is probably going to pop at some point.
Agreed. And I think my grades are how I have them laid out. Little different. Very similar sentiments, though. Just small tweaks. So I've got Jermaine Burton and Javon Baker with the exact same grade as I look here. And they're settling in the right behind the Devontae Walker and right along with the Xavier Legette for me. I think I have Jalen Polk also in that area, but I'm far more excited for Burton and Baker than I probably should be. But they're a part of that glut of players for me. Funnily enough, again, talking about today, Jamari Thrash, Malik Washington is separated by 0.5 point in the same little area. And then Isaiah Williams and Johnny Wilson, also kind of similar area. But again, we're talking way down on this list. I think, unfortunately, Johnny Wilson has my lowest grade for film. And Isaiah Williams is not far ahead. So I'm similar too, because again, I think I have a lot of the just struggles of thinking through Johnny Wilson and some of the things that we saw, and like, oh, like these things can lead to goodness. And so I'm fighting with the inconsistencies that I saw from him against the like really super high end flashes that I saw from Jermaine Burton, but also were flashes. And just as I walk through the process, being transparent with y'all, like maybe I'm attributing too much flash to Burton and dinging Johnny Wilson too much for, again, flashes, but I think Burton's flashes were more consistent. Not to say that they were consistent always, but anyway, it's interesting, but I've got Burton and Baker head and shoulders above this group of guys.
This is a really difficult class for me, the wide receivers specifically, to evaluate. Although we're having a similar issue with the running backs, but like a tier down, like the running backs start a tier down. Yeah. But it's always, to me, the mark of a good class when I struggle to differentiate between players, because if it's a bad class, just a note. Like I don't. It's fine, but I don't need to spend time trying to figure out who's going to be what, because they're not going to be anything that I'm interested in. Whereas this class, there is such a group of, man, I can see potential in these wide receivers specifically. And I think the issue we're going to have with this is, where do they all go? It's the same thing we had for an issue back in, 2018, 2019 with running backs after you had the 2017 class come in, and then you had the 2018 class where you had Chubb and Saquon, and you start looking around and you're trying to figure out where these players fit. I think we're almost at that saturation point with wide receiver where, like, this class is great, but how does it fit within the landscape of the NFL? Because A, the NFL landscape at wide receiver is shifting, and B, there are so many players that they all kind of end up looking the same. It's, you're driving in the Midwest and it's just the field after field after field after field, and like they're all beautiful. There was a song, the amber waves of grain, but they all kind of blend together after a while.
Didn't we already drive past here? Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, fascinating class, and I think it's going to make for really interesting experiences in our rookie drafts, as we talked about before. All right, Zach, I know that we have, what is it, 3 more Fridays or Thursdays before the NFL draft? I think 2 more, right?
2 more, I'm pretty sure. I could check the calendar on you, but so we've got the 11th, the 18th, and then the 25th is happening. Yeah, so we got 2 more. We got running backs next week.
Running backs it is, y'all. Look, we've neglected them for a while now. I know many of you have been reaching out and wondering, hey, y'all been talking about a whole lot of stuff besides running backs. There's got to be more. There's got to be more to this life. And you're right, there is. We're going to get back to him. We'll talk the likes of a Will Shipley. We'll talk the likes of a Tyrone Tracy Jr. I'm sure that there will be others that we'll talk through that we brought up before. Zach, if you try to sneak Louisville's Jawar Jordan in, I might revolt. I might just revolt.
I do think he's better than Guarendo, who's getting a lot of buzz, but I don't think that he's somebody that we necessarily need to spend too much time on.
All right, almost finished typing up my notice, my 2-week notice. No, but we got running backs coming next week. Excited to be able to continue forward, and y'all, before you know it, we're going to be here at the draft, and this time is starting to speed through. Just like that, out of nowhere, the Hootenany starting to slow down a little bit. It's been so fun to be able to do this, but only 2 more, and then obviously we'll be breaking down what happens after the draft, and we'll see what happens with recordings and things from that nature. But there's plenty to talk about. There's no shortage of fun to be discussed, as well as strategy. And again, thank you, podcast listener, YouTube watcher, Twitter follower, whoever you are, however you support, however you're tapping in with us. Again, you could spend an hour plus doing anything in the world. The fact that you decide to let us in is wildly humbling, and we're grateful for it. So thank you. Thank you for caring enough to hear what we've got to say about these players. Zach, final words. As always, go to you.
That's it. I am always taken aback by the people that listen, the interactions we get. It's humbling. It's fun for, I think, both of us to be able to do this. It's, JMic, you always say it's a labor of love. And the fact that we get so much love back from what we put in and put out to you, it's really fun and humbling, and worthwhile. And for me this year, and I'm just going to real quick plug, because it's not really a plug because it's for charity. This year, it's been so much fun for me to be able to donate all of my rookie notes, all of my film watching to Fantasy Cares. And if you are interested in getting a copy of all of these profiles written up, made beautiful by Bob Gilchrist. fantasycares.org/dummies. And that will get you to a link to donate. And if you don't care about my film notes, you're not going to hurt my feelings at all. That's perfectly fine. I am a dummy. Still go donate to fantasycares.org. Go get t-shirts. Go make a donation to them, because there are so many places, so many charities that benefit from all of the good the fantasy community can do through fantasycares.org. So go check that out. Go make a donation if you want my film notes. fantasycares.org/dummies. We really appreciate you being here. If you were in the chat, you are awesome. I've seen so many people pop in and out. Toronto Dave and Peter Howard and Craig, Tim, Puff Pass Kicklick. We appreciate you rolling with us. If you're listening, appreciate that too. I am at Tacit Assassin 13 on Twitter. JMic is at JMic Check. The show is at Dynasty Dummies. We appreciate you listening. This has been the Dynasty Dummies. And I got
Isaiah Davis, Dylan Laube, Rashid Ali, Carson Steele, Frank Gore Jr., not senior.
I mean, maybe.
Before. I mean,
running it back.
Tyrone Tracy, right? Way back machine.
Oh.